It's your meeting, sir, whenever you want to.
Sounds good. Well, welcome everybody. Today's Thursday, September 17th. This is our monthly MPO Policy Committee meeting, and let's call this meeting to order. And who will take roll?
I can do that.
Tracy's got it.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Barely.
Vern Willing, City of Altoona.
Here.
Paul Moritz, City of Ankeny.
Here.
David Jones, City of Ankeny.
That's
Here.
better.
Kurt Sullivan, City of Bondurant. Ruth Randleman, City of Carlisle.
Here.
Ted Weaver, City of Clive.
Here.
Brent Highfill, City of Cumming.
Here.
Mark Hanson, Dallas County.
Present.
Elizabeth Prosciutti, Dart.
Yeah.
Frank County, City of Des Moines.
Here.
Connie Boson, City of Des Moines.
Here.
Chris Coleman, City of Des Moines. Joe Gatto, City of Des Moines.
Here.
Bill Gray, City of Des Moines.
I didn't get.
I'm sorry. City of Elkhart, Colton Force. Scott Mickelson, City of Grimes. Ryan Waller, City of Indianola. Jim Evans, City of Johnston. Tom Leaners, Madison County.
Here.
Tammy Dillavue, City of Mitchellville. Stephanie Riva, City of Norwalk.
Here.
Sarah Kowalski, City of Pleasant Hill.
Present.
Jeff Walters, City of Polk City.
Here.
Polk County, Matt McCoy.
Here.
Oh, I'm just pretty glad you guys.
Kyle Michael, City of Van Meter. Brenda Cook, Warren County. City of Waukee, Courtney Clark. City of West Des Moines, Laura Rovelli.
Here.
City of West Des Moines, Jamie Luxford.
Present.
City of Windsor Heights, Joseph Jones.
Here.
Scott Brennan.
Present.
Kevin Foley, Des Moines Airport.
Here.
Darla Huckabee, FHWA. Andy Lunan.
I'm here.
And Herta, Julia Castillo. Is there anyone present that I did not call?
I thought I saw Brooke on for her.
And Bob Andwig, Urbandale, I didn't hear, there was a lot of static at one point, but I didn't hear
Okay,
the name.
I got you, Bob. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
And Carl Voss from Des Moines.
Thank you, Carl. Okay, we're good.
Tracy, thank you. Item number 3 is vote on the approval of the agenda.
I'll move approval. This is Connie.
Second by Andwig.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 4 is approval of the meeting minutes, August 20, 2020.
Move, Willie.
Second, Coleman.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 5 is consent vote on the approval of the financial statement. Todd?
Yeah, those were sent out in your packet, kind of our standard expenses. The biggest item in there was kind of an in and out of the Iowa DOT rail loan for the transload facility. And got the request and reimbursement from the DOT, sent that out to Des Moines Industrial. Otherwise, I recommend approval. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Todd?
Move approval, Willie.
Second, Reba.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 6 is consent and vote on contracts and expenses. Todd?
Yeah, this is related to the Purple Heart Highway study that we were looking at. HNTP is the contractor for that. We'll have a little more on this item later on in the agenda, but they submitted payment for $27,435 and change. I recommend approval of that.
Any questions for Todd or discussion?
Move to approve. Randleman.
President will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 7 is public comment on any MPO actions. Is there anyone on the line that if you just raise your hand, we'd be able to include you in the public comment at this time. I see none. We'll move on to item number 8 is a presentation of the integrated corridor management. Dylan.
Thank you. So we're here today to talk about the integrated corridor management project, and we've had a few updates on this over the course of the last couple of years. But now it's getting to a point where the Iowa DOT and in working with the other partners want to start reaching out to the community. So we have with us on the line Neil Fobian from the Iowa DOT, who's the project manager for this. And I believe there's a few other folks from the project consultant team as well as the Iowa DOT who might jump in. But with that, I'll turn it over to Neil.
All right, thanks, Dylan. I guess, should I share my screen or are you just going to advance the slides for me?
I'll just advance the slides for you.
Oh, okay, thanks. So as Dylan mentioned, my name's Neil Fobian. I'm with Location and Environment Bureau at the DOT. Just want to thank everybody for giving us the opportunity to speak to your group today. Give you guys just kind of a brief update on our ICM project. Integrated corridor management. So what is integrated corridor management? It's managing our network of roadways, and so that includes kind of the freeways and local arterials kind of as a whole system instead of looking at the individual roads. We can optimize the system by coordinating multiple modes of transportation through various jurisdictions. And by doing that, we can find capacity within kind of our current infrastructure. And through this coordination, we can deliver projects in a more cost-effective manner than kind of our traditional way of doing business. Next slide. So we've been taking a collaborative approach to this study. This slide here is showing the stakeholders that we've been working with. We've been working with DART, local jurisdictions, FHWA, MPO, and some of the local business groups. It really takes a collaborative effort to make our project a success, and just want to thank everybody that's been involved in it so far. Taking the time out to join our workshops and meetings. We had all the input that we get. It's definitely appreciated. Our study area on this slide here consists of Interstate 80 from 169 over by DeSoto to First Street in Altoona. On Interstate 35, we're going from the Highway 5 bypass up to 36th Street in Ankeny. It includes 235 between the two system interchanges, a portion of US 65 by Altoona and Pleasant Hill, and then all the orange routes shown on the map too are some selected in parallel connecting arterials. Next slide. So this has been our project timeline so far. We started the project off about 2 years ago, back in 2018. Last year, we were working on developing our phase 1 strategies, and we've been moving that forward and working on getting some of those early win projects programmed and getting those put into our 5-year program. As we move forward, we're looking at starting some of these different program committees, and then following that up with stakeholder and an online public meeting, and then leading into some implementation. Next slide. So the advanced freeway management strategies that we've been looking at are peak period shoulder use. What that consists of is opening up the shoulders to become kind of a driving lane. That's done by putting a overhead sign with either like a red X or a green arrow on that sign to indicate whether that lane is open for use or not. We looked at a queue warning system to warn drivers of slow traffic ahead, and that would consist of putting a dynamic message sign on overhead gantries. And the third strategy we looked at is ramp metering, which if anybody has traveled in the Minneapolis area on the freeways, I'm sure you're familiar with ramp metering, but that is consists of putting traffic signal heads kind of at the end of the ramp to control the flow of traffic onto the main line, and that just helps keep a steady flow of traffic on the main line, increasing safety and some travel time reliability there. Next slide. Yep. So on 235 corridor, location of these improvements, we're looking at ramp metering from the downtown area, 2nd Avenue heading westbound out to 63rd Street. And then eastbound, we'd be looking at starting at the southwest mix, heading east to that 63rd Street exit again. And then the queue warning system would be located at Euclid Avenue, heading eastbound up to the northeast Mixmaster. Next slide. And on 3580, we're looking at a couple spot locations for ramp meters. Westbound, we're looking at the entrance ramp of 2nd Avenue, and eastbound, it'd be the entrance ramp at Myrtle Hay. And then the queue warning system would be both eastbound and westbound from Ryder Corner or Highway 141 down to the southwest Mixmaster. And then we would have peak period shoulder use, both eastbound and westbound from 86th Street exit all the way over to kind of the northeast Mixmaster. And then the purple areas indicated on the slide here represent locations where the DOT already has projects programmed or under construction. Next slide. So this is our engagement schedule. This fall, we're looking at getting some of these committees formed. And then moving into winter, we want to have a online stakeholder meeting. Virtual peer exchange has actually got put off a little bit. We were hoping to have it this winter, but that's more likely going to be early spring, along with that public awareness campaign. And then as we move into the summer, we look at forming some of those program charter meetings. But what I really want to point out on this slide here is 3 key initiatives that we're looking at. First thing is we'd really like to pursue some federal dollars through a federal grant to help fund a bigger ICM bundle or package. And that could be either through a build grant or the ATCM TD grant or possibly an infra grant. Another one of our goals would be to have 1 or more non-freeway project programmed in collaboration with the locals. We could start working on some of those non-freeway projects with our partners. And the last goal is we just want to keep building on this positive public perception of ICM, and in particular the ramp metering strategy that we've been developing. So, next slide. I guess that was all that we had for now. If you guys would be interested in more information, you can visit our project website that we have up there. There's also a place on there you can sign up for notifications and a spot to submit comments if you'd have any comments that you'd like to add. I guess with that, I'd just like to open it up for questions. Anybody have any questions?
Any questions for? I hear none. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Neil. Item number 9 is report and vote on FY 2021-2024 TIP amendment request.
Yes, thank you. The item before you is a TIP amendment request from the Iowa Department of Transportation. Their request is to amend the federal fiscal year 2021 through 2024 TIP. The project in question is a pavement rehab project for Interstate 35 in the Ankeny area. The total funding for this project is about $3.9 million, and it's using PRF or primary road funds. There's essentially no project modifications itself. The request for the amendment is to modify the funding information from state to federal. So with that, staff is in support of the amendment request from the DOT. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Shiroshi. Any questions for Shiroshi?
Move.
Second, Willie.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 10 is report and vote on the ICAP pre-application program.
Last month, we discussed with you the applications that were submitted for ICAP funding. In total, we had 6 pre-applications that were submitted. A list of those applications was included in your agenda packet. The list in the agenda packet includes more detail about the project descriptions and the total amount that they're requesting. But you can see the basic information on the screen before you regarding the 6 applications that were submitted for ICAP funding. Following approval of today's meeting, we will forward on the resolutions to the project sponsors so they can include those in their agenda packets, which are due to Iowa DOT by October 1st. So we'll probably get those sent out to the project applicants sometime next week after we get the resolutions back. If you have any questions about the ICAP applications, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Anybody have any questions for Zach? This is item number 10. It is a voting item. Is there any discussion or questions?
I would move it, Vern Willie.
Second, Reba.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 11 is a report on the Economic Development District. Todd,
Yeah,
I
thank
think you're
you.
going to educate us a little bit on this.
Yeah, I'll do my best. We've started looking at these. We've gotten some information from different organizations. IDEA talked to us a couple times about this over the years, and thought we would bring some information to this group. An economic development district is a multi-jurisdictional entity, similar in a lot of ways to the MPO. It helps areas during economic distress, such as natural disasters, a couple of which we've just gone through. Also helps prepare the regions for economic prosperity and resiliency. Go ahead. What they are not is they're not a chamber of commerce or an organization like the Greater Des Moines Partnership. We have talked with the partnership quite a bit about these over the last few years, and they're very supportive of the creation of an EDD, but not really interested in operating one. It doesn't do an economic development office work like cities and counties. It doesn't recruit businesses. It deals more with helping communities set up for bringing businesses in, helping with those kind of basic infrastructure and systems, and putting those in place to help fit their needs. Go ahead. What they do, they're sort of the first entity that receives funding from the Economic Development Administration during major disasters. And I'll talk a little bit more of that in a second. They provide some regional leadership and facilitate economic activities through what's called a SEDS. It's kind of a long-range plan, similar to our long-range transportation plan, but more on systems on the economic side of things and just a lot of community planning type things. Provide some additional resources to communities within the district, helping leverage some resource and grant opportunities. Fills in some gaps on needed services where they don't maybe have expertise or staffing to take on some things. This helps bring that those resources available. As I said, go ahead. Just to give you an idea where economic development districts are, you can see they're quite prevalent across the country. Those areas in blue represent districts. Go ahead. In the state of Iowa, the whole state is covered by economic development districts, except central Iowa does not. Next slide. So why are we talking about this now? As I mentioned, we've talked with IDA and others about this over the years, but when an economic development district can only be established after a major disaster or a presidential declaration of a disaster. Last time that was available to this area was during the 2008 floods. Go ahead. With the declaration during the pandemic from the president of disaster area, that provided us the opportunity and sort of brought this back to the forefront of our thinking about, hey, maybe we need to start looking at this again. Go ahead. Also in the CARES Act, when that was passed by Congress and signed into law in March, it provided over $2 trillion in economic relief, as many of you are aware. What was also in there was funding that was available through the Economic Development Administration that went to all of those economic development districts that we showed earlier across the country. Each of those economic development districts received over $400,000 in funding for recovery efforts, and planning or staffing or buying supplies. All across Iowa received that except for Central Iowa, which had no EDD to accept those funds. Go ahead. Other than that, the funds are available through the EDD to do planning, economic adjustment, public works, and assorted one-time grant opportunities. Go ahead. Some examples, we shared this with the exec last week, and we wanted to share some examples of what some of the things that these funds have been used for. Relocation of water mains for resiliency, a training facility for skills and technical skills on Southwest Community College, Sioux City Airport up in our northwest portion of the state, as well as City of Dryersville for the Field of Dreams project also received funding. So it covers a wide range of activities. A lot of it's focused on systems and infrastructure, resiliency or planning. Go ahead. Just to also give you an idea, over the last 10 years, this is the money that's flowed into EDDs across the state. Roughly about 39 million, a little over $39 million has come into the state through EDDs via EDA programs, and Central Iowa hasn't received. The 330,000, which is in Central Iowa district, was some very specific things from the Economic Development Administration for microfinancing. It wasn't related to EDDs. Now again, that number is shown in a little different graphic. The Central Iowa portion being that 330,000 for microfinancing. Go ahead. So what does it take to form an EDD? Every county must be in the presidentially declared disaster area. We have that with COVID-19. They have basically a 2-year clock to get this accomplished. Obviously not wanting to take that long, but that's the time frame. There also must be a board established. It has to have public and private representation on that board. The support of all the counties in the EDD area. They do not have to formally participate, but they have to agree to the formation of it. The state has to concur with the formation. We've been in discussions just to understand the program with IDEA, and I don't see that being an issue. A local match, there's $70,000 in funding that comes from the IDEA for this program that has to be matched dollar for dollar to help administer the program. So that at some point, after it's formed and we get the membership established, that would have to be figured out on how that would be raised. I mentioned the comprehensive economic development strategy, SEDS, would have to also be created. That again is similar to a long-range plan, but more of an economic infrastructure resiliency side of things. Go ahead. One of the other questions asked was, where were these agencies staffed? Most of them are staffed within either the MPO or regional commission throughout the state. Where there is an MPO, they're with the MPO. Where there isn't MPOs in the state, that's with the regional commission. They aren't really separate from one or the other in any of the areas. The only difference is Ames and Iowa City and Cedar Rapids. Their MPOs are staffed by city staff, and then the regional commission handles the economic development district. Go ahead. Again, majority of this regions and state are staffed by regional entities. Again, Iowa City and Cedar Rapids have city staff that do those separate tasks. Go ahead. Why we would what we're proposing as the MPO's role, we're sort of uniquely positioned to help administer the economic development district, similar to what we do for SERPTA. We could do something similar and help staff the Regional Planning Alliance for Area 11. We have some staff that are experienced with EDDs. As I said, much like SERPTA, potentially do this through a contract. The MPO would not be a member or otherwise affiliated with the organization. It would have its own board. We would just be helping staff the organization. The 140,000 is that 70,000 that comes from the state, and then the match to cover the budget for staffing. And then the EDA, we would be looking to support the region through grants and potentially revolving loans or other loan programs, and there'd be some administrative recovery on that, so it would effectively end up paying for itself. So what's the next steps? Start the process of talking with the counties to see if they're interested in forming an EDD. As I said, all the counties have to support the creation of it. They don't have to join the district. They can join later. Cities are also eligible to join once it's formed. The counties are the key piece there. And then the state of Iowa governor has to support the designation as well. Go ahead. As I mentioned, counties and cities can opt in immediately or later. We've done some kind of back of the napkin math on that 70,000, assuming a certain percentage of people join in of a per capita rate for the local match. Between 12 to 15 cents per person. On the conservative side, it could be less than that to match that 70,000 in grant funds. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, that's the last slide. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Talking with exec and Joe or anybody from exec can jump in here. Exec said we can start talking to the counties about potentially exploring this idea and then see where we go from there.
Anybody have any questions for Todd?
I might just suggest that this is Mark Hansen from Dallas County. You know, the MPO board is one thing, but I think MPO maybe should make this presentation to a county board meeting, at least in our case, to let all of us hear it at the same time and make a decision would be in our interest.
Yeah, Mark, I think that would be the next step, is to reach out to each county and schedule a time to kind of walk through this process.
Perfect, thanks.
Todd?
Yes.
This is David Jones in Ankeny. Obviously, I'm not completely privy to what conversations happened in exec. I did talk to Mayor Lorenz a little bit yesterday about it, but having worked a lot with development districts in other states, I've always found it interesting that Central Iowa hadn't formed one. Working in medium-sized cities and then a relatively large county with them, I found that they deliver value, significant value over time. And obviously, a lot of focus right now is on the emergency funding because the money is really flowing through because of CARES. But even year to year, the technical assistance, the things that these EDDs do once they're formed, bring a lot of value to organizations, to public organizations. So I hope that the board will keep the ball rolling on this. I do think that as far as who needs to initiate it, it needs to be somebody that can easily be able to do government-to-government business and be very well versed in that intergovernmental work, grant finding, and administering federal funds with all of the persnickety rules. So I think the MPO is well suited to do it. I've had great results in other jobs in other states as a result of it. I hope we keep the ball rolling on this. That's all.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? You know, that's what we talked about at the executive level. You know, if there's an opportunity for us to get more funding for Central Iowa and we're not taking advantage of it, then we're not doing our job. And so we want Todd to get us some more information, and then as a full policy decision, we'll tackle that as the time comes. But we want to make sure that we're not losing opportunities. I think was the key that we all hit on at the exec. All right, I hear any other discussion. We will move on to item 12. It's a report on the Unified Planning Work Program project development. Dylan.
Thank you. Now that we're into the new fiscal year and getting into the new projects that were included in the work program, we want to periodically come to you and present the projects that we're going to be working on rather than do the work and then come to you and say, here's the results of it. So just a heads up, we're going to be doing this periodically, like I said. And the first one we're going to talk about today is the environmental justice report. And this is something that you've seen before. So hopefully it's not brand new to most everyone. Allison's going to talk through this. But in some cases, when we bring this forward, it might be a new project. And really what we're looking for, both from this group as well as the executive and technical committees, is just things we need to be thinking about, just any input you have into the project development before we get into, like I said, doing the work and then coming to you. We just want to prevent anything happening, getting feedback where it might be kind of too late to go back and adjust after the fact. So with that, I'll turn it over to Allison.
Thanks, Dylan. So like Dylan said, this fall we'll be updating the environmental justice report. It's a report that the MPO puts out periodically, typically before a scoring and funding cycle. That funding cycle starts in 2021, so a good time to start this report now. So just as a review, we use this internally for project scoring, as well as other MPO planning initiatives that we have, and we also integrate it into our performance measure reports when possible. And then externally, we put this out for public consumption on our website, and then also we work with member organizations and partner organizations to utilize this in their work as well to find, to add value to Metro work. So just as a refresher, there are 7 degrees of disadvantage we've used historically. They're on the left. I won't read them all out for you, but those are the ones we've used historically. They've stayed pretty consistent. The one thing that has been changing in the last couple of years is the thresholds of when a census tract is in an environmental justice area. So just as a reminder, those degrees of disadvantage are taken from the American Community Survey, and then we find a regional average based on the data from CPS for each of those, and then determine the regional average. And then if a census tract is above a regional average, it gets a mark for each degrees of disadvantage. So then on the other side with the thresholds, until 2019, that threshold was 6 degrees of disadvantage over the regional average. In 2018, we shifted that to 4, so there's 7. We figured that over half of the degrees of disadvantage would create an environmental justice area. During 2019 community discussion, moved that back to 6 for project scoring. But then in 2020, we actually used a stratified threshold of 0 to 3, 4 to 5, 7 for the funding of, or for the project scoring for funding purposes. And so we wanted to bring this back before you. We are starting to pull some of the data, and we wanted to just have a discussion about both the degrees of disadvantage and the thresholds, make sure everybody was comfortable with this, and then we will start preparing the report and then bring it back to you hopefully in November for presentation and approval. The one last thing I would say before any discussion, that we do plan on bringing this on Monday as well to the planning committee, since that's a much smaller group of planners who might use this data in their day-to-day work. And so this will go before them as well next week. So with that, I would open it up to any discussion, any comments and feedback you might have for me.
Allison, thank you. Open it up for a little discussion. Any questions or comments? I know at the exec, we talked about aging infrastructure as one of the degrees of disadvantage, and I'm not sure where that leaves us. I don't see that added to the list. Is that taken into consideration?
So we have not added that to the list, mostly because in between staff, we discussed having one data source for a lot of this stuff. So then the increments and the yearly revolving numbers match up. But we do incorporate this into the pavement conditions report that comes out, which then overlays those two. So then you can see that infrastructure, not necessarily the age, but the condition of the infrastructure rather than the age. When we were talking internally, you know, things like Grand Avenue have been around since the beginning of Des Moines, so that age is not necessarily comparable to how often it is maintained. And so that's up for discussion. It's just not something that we could get from the same data source that we pull everything else from. And the other side would be that these are mostly socioeconomic data points rather than infrastructure, but that's something to discuss.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions or comments? All right, we'll move forward. Item number 13 is a report on the transload facility and update from Zach.
Just wanted to give you a quick update on where we're at with the transload facility development. As you recall, we've been working through an environmental assessment over the last year or so, and I'm happy to say that we've gotten sign off from the Federal Railroad Administration for the EA. The FONSI was completed and signed off on, and so the EA process has officially been completed, which means we can move on into the construction of the project. Additionally, the grant agreement, which had kind of been sitting on a shelf until the EA was completed, has also been processed and signed, and we have been assigned a project number. So as I mentioned before, we've kind of finalized the two major things that were keeping us from moving into the construction phase. Next slide, Dylan. So kind of the next steps that we're looking at, we've signed the sub-agreement between the MPO and Des Moines Industrial, so that has also been taken care of. We've got a kickoff meeting with the FRA on Monday to discuss the basics of the grant reimbursement project or process, as well as project delivery. So following that meeting on Monday, we should have a much stronger understanding of what the process moving forward is going to look like as far as the administration of the grant. And just kind of as a side note, that grant agreement was signed on September 3rd. They backdated it for September 1st. So any project costs that Des Moines Industrial has moving forward that are eligible under the build grant after September 1st or after will be eligible. So they can start reimbursing towards the build grant at any time. Next slide. This table here is kind of shows you the basics of kind of what we have moving forward as far as some deadlines. So the detailed project work plan, budget, and schedule, those are all, you know, that we can begin that start date on October 1st and it's due by November 30th. Final design is on a similar timeline. Construction can begin as soon as October 31st. It really can begin sooner than that now that we have the grant agreement finalized. And then closeout and project administration, those, the deadline on that is March 31st of 2022. They've added a pretty large cushion into that. We don't anticipate that we'll have any expenses really probably beyond 2021. But we do have a little bit of a cushion there just in case weather or something pushes the development of the project into 2022. That's where we're at with the transload facility. Exciting news, getting the EA completed and the FONSI signed off on and being able to move into the construction phase of the project. Be happy to take any questions that you have.
Any questions for Zach? Zach, thank you, and Todd and Scott. I know it took a lot of hands and a lot of work with this, but I'm glad to see we're to the point where we're at, and hopefully we can get moving and get it constructed. So thank all of you.
Thank you.
Item number 14 is a report on the Purple Heart Highway update from Todd.
Thank you. As mentioned earlier, HNTB completed their report on the update of that study that we originally did back in 2012. Some of the main findings of that are that the cost to do the conversion are down significantly. The previous study had identified an estimated potential cost of $36 million. That's dropped to $3 million. A lot of that has to do with changing criteria as far as the interstate standards have gone. Right now, we're reviewing that document. The DOT is reviewing that document. They provided some comments to us, which we've shared back with the consultant. But we're both still taking a look at the document, making sure everybody's on the same page. Go ahead. So as I mentioned, some of the next steps, DOT's comments that they have submitted back to us is they want to really identify where the farm gates that are in the report. There's a couple farm gate locations identified in the report. They were, with the grass being as tall as it was out there, they couldn't for sure identify one or two of the locations. So DOT asked us to look at their as-built to determine the exact location. Review the design standards against a certain section of the design manual just to make sure everything's checked off. There's a rock road access for those farm gates that's proposed. That's one of the costs that was on the previous slide. Determine if what type of right-of-way is needed for that, and if it's there, or if we're going to have a purchasing issue. We also want to follow up with Farm Bureau. We've been talking with them throughout this process. They know this report is coming, so we need to touch base with them about where we're at with this, and then determine a plan of action with our board and there's a committee that Mayor Krosky and Stephanie Riva and Ruth Randleman are both on, that has kind of been helping guide this process, talk with them about the next steps, and make a formal ask of the DOT to start the interstate designation process. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Todd? Thank you. Any questions? All right, we'll move on to item number 15 is a report on water trails. An update on that, Todd.
Yes, thank you. Again, this project's continuing to move forward. We're waiting on the environmental document draft has been submitted to the DOT for comments. Andy, if you could check with Office of Location Environment on where they're at with that, or whoever's got it last. I know we're waiting to get those comments back. We've gotten the permit from the Corps of Engineers to look at Prospect Park, and that's I think mostly completed. The draft build to grant agreement is being reviewed by the DOT and Federal Highway. Last I checked with Federal Highway, they were okay with what we'd had, but we're talking with Paul LaFleur next week. City's been reviewing the design team's memo on the flood storage on the Scott Avenue dam modification. Go ahead. We submitted the Cs I mentioned for comments to the DOT back in August, waiting for those comments. Up next, really the next big milestone is preliminary design review with the DOT in early November, and then getting check plans in after that, after the new year. So the project's moving forward. Got still some things with funding to work out through the project, but the design side of things are working out. Happy to answer any questions.
Todd, thank you. Any questions for Todd concerning the water trails? I hear none. We'll move on to item 16 is a report on a legislative update from Dylan.
Thank you. A couple of things to report here. The House, as I mentioned, I think maybe last time, the House has passed their version of the 21 appropriations bill, but the Senate has not done anything yet. So we're still waiting on that. The other thing coming up is at the end of September, the FAST Act, which is the current transportation bill, will expire. There's been some work in both the House and the Senate to propose new bills. Each chamber, basically the Senate committee that is responsible for this has passed their version. The House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee has done the same, but they have not been able to come together yet. Both chairs of those respective committees are proposing a one-year extension to the FAST Act. So this would be a 12-month extension rather than a month-to-month one, to provide a little bit more just predictability in funding levels. And then they take that year to come to terms of what that next bill will look like. So that's where things stand right now. And some of those were just announced earlier in the last couple of days. So that's what we have for you at the moment. I don't know if Todd or anybody else has anything they want to add.
No, that about covers it, I think.
Dylan, thank you. Any questions? All right. Item 17 is a report of upcoming events from Gunner.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is one that I'm really excited about. James Chung coming up Wednesday morning on the 23rd. This is a virtual talk, 7:30 in the morning. It'll be worth getting to your computer screen at this time. You might recall that James Chung was here 2 years ago talking about the data he found while mining for data for his other clients, which are cities around the country, hoping to gain a competitive edge in the marketplace. And he said at the time that Des Moines really stood out in the data as being very competitive in a lot of ways. Of course, a lot has changed since then. He's coming back to help reassess the region's strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. There's a lot of interest in this particular speaker. We already have more than 260 people signed up for it. I hope you join soon and that you're able to attend again coming up in a week's time. I'd also remind you that there is a 21-day equity challenge starting October 5th being put on by the United Way of Central Iowa. This is a self-guided learning tour to learn how inequity and racism affect our lives and the community.
Gunner, thank you.
Very
Any
welcome.
questions or comments for Gunner? Item number 18 is other non-action items of interest to the committee. Todd, I think you have one.
Yeah, just real quick, I just wanted to congratulate Polk County. They received a $25 million build grant for their Broadway Avenue project. And I also think it's pretty interesting and outstanding that in the last several years, we've received over $60 million in build grants for the region. So I think that's something the region could be really proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else have any non-action items?
This is Elizabeth with DART.
Yes.
I just wanted to let everybody know that we'll be hosting a socially distanced unveiling of our electric buses on October 1st up at the state capitol. So you'll all be getting an invite by email, but it's really exciting. We have 5 of our 7 electric vehicles on site and all of our charging equipment works, and look forward to putting those out for the public here later this winter.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? All right, our next meeting is October 15th, 2020 at 4 p.m. I believe we'll still be virtual at that time unless something drastically changes. So looking forward to seeing everyone at some point in time in person, but not in October. And this meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.